it's Gabby and welcome to the Happier Life Project, brought to you by the free, award-winning mental health and wellness app, My Possible Self. Now, last week I mentioned that April is Stress Awareness Month, and we revisited an episode from the archives where you lovely lot got to put your questions to our stress expert, Dr. Bernadette Dancy. With the spotlight still firmly on stress, because let's face it, it's something most of us are challenged with, and a little bit of extra support never goes amiss, this week we're doing something a little different and very special. The Happier Life Project has teamed up with the Motivation Mindset podcast for a joint crossover episode, bringing together two podcasts with a shared mission, helping you better understand stress and giving you some practical tools to help manage it with more ease, intention, and self-compassion. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined once again by Risa Williams, a psychotherapist, time management coach, author, and host of the award-winning productivity podcast, The Motivation Mindset. You may remember Risa from when she was a guest on this very podcast last year in an episode titled Time Management Techniques, Reduce Stress, Anxiety and Overwhelm with Risa Williams. And more recently, I had the pleasure of being a guest on Risa's podcast, where we dove into hustle culture, burnout, and how to step away from the pressure to always be on. Today, we're reconnecting for another powerful conversation, this time centered around Risa's latest book, Get Stuff Done Without the Stress. It's filled with practical, science-based tools that can help you shift your feeling of overwhelm and stress to more capable, focused, and in control. In this episode, I share some of my favourite tools from the book, and Risa explains the psychology behind why they work so well. We talk about how to break down big, often overwhelming goals into more small, manageable steps so we can keep making progress without burning out, procrastinating, or never getting round to completing. We also touch on Stress Awareness Month, a national campaign that's been observed every April since 1992 to increase public understanding of stress, its causes, and how to manage it. This year's theme is #LeadWithLove, a beautiful reminder to approach ourselves, our workloads, and our worries with more care and compassion. Risa and I do indeed chat about letting go of the toxic productivity mindset many of us are, quite frankly, brainwashed into thinking is the only way to do life, and how we might go about replacing it with one rooted in self-love, sustainability, balance, and leading with love. So if you've been feeling overwhelmed, stuck in a loop of procrastination, or just need a new way to tackle your ever-expanding to-do list without the pressure, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. This is our special crossover episode with the Motivation Mindset and the brilliant Risa Williams.
I'm here joined today once again by Gabby Sanderson. I had so much fun talking to you last time, and I'm glad you're back.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me back. I also had a really great time talking with you, both for your podcast and for ours as well.
Yeah, this is going to be a double podcast episode, which will air on the Happier Life Project podcast and the Motivation Mindset podcast. It's cool. We're kind of going global with this episode, and that'll be exciting. We're going to talk about stress today because in the UK, it's Stress Awareness Month. And it might be here too. I don't know. Everybody's stressed out here in the US right now. It's a very stressful time. So I know you read my book, and my book is about bringing the stress down. So what are some tools that stood out and resonated with you? I know you've just gone through kind of a stressful time as well.
Have I ever? They say moving house is like one of the most, it's in the top 3, isn't it? Most stressful happen to a person. So I've literally just done that. I've still got a few more boxes to unpack. Yes, I really, really enjoyed reading the book. I mean, I actually got a lot out of our chat as well from last time. It was quite a stressy period with work for me. And so some of the things you said, I did apply them, such as giving myself Sundays off. So that helped me get through that kind of stressful time. In terms of useful tools in the book, there was loads. It was jam-packed, wasn't there? But the first I loved straight away, the goal map.
Oh, good.
Because I immediately wanted to do it, you know? You're kind of inviting people in to sort of, right, let's do this. Let's get stuff done without the stress.
Yeah, I wanted to put it at the beginning of the book before I started talking about stress, because I wanted to give like a little teaser warm-up exercise to start mapping your goals out on paper. So for those of you who haven't read Get Stuff Done Without the Stress, it's my goal mapping tool. And I have people draw 3 columns. And one of the columns I just make people call self-care, because part of the problem I found with working on goals with people over so many years is that they tend to tip themselves way off balance if it's a really big goal or something they're putting a lot of energy into. So the reason we call it self-care is like, while we're working on other parts of our lives, I want to keep your well-being in mind. So by self-care, we're talking about things that actively bring your stress down. And that can also be a hard thing for a lot of people. They don't know what actively brings their stress down. You know, like for you right now, what would be on that column for you?
Well, yeah. And I love the fact that you started with that as well, because I think that's the thing that usually people leave to the very end, and then there's no time left for the self-care. So, I mean, I talked about it last time, and I can talk about it forever. Yoga for me is like my absolute, it's so grounding. It gets me out of my head, and I just feel so much clearer after I've gone through the poses and the stretches, and especially the ones where it is a bit challenging. I think that actually helps me because I'm focusing on balancing or strength or whatever it is, that it gets out of my head and gives me some breathing space.
Right. I think for you, you were talking about slowing down on purpose, right? And yoga is wonderful for that because it's very difficult to rush through yoga. You have to take your time moving in between the poses and settling into them. And it's not a go, go, go type of exercise.
Yeah, exactly. And when I did the goal map in self-care, it was yoga, but I wanted to increase it to more like 5 or 6 times a week because of everything I've had going on. It's been like twice a week, 3 max. Yeah. And I just, if I could double that, I would feel so much better.
Yeah. But even 3 times a week, that's pretty good. I'd say that's a good place to just kind of lean into that and keep that consistent. And then some weeks when things are slower, you can add more. Now, under yoga, what I encourage people to do is yoga is great, but then have a few other, like I call it a grab bag of self-care, because what happens is sometimes we get a little too rigid. I know I do sometimes with like, I'm going to go for a walk every day. But there are just some days that is not a great option and I just don't have time, or I'll just use it as an excuse to not do anything to take care of myself. So what else did you have on there to give yourself a little variety?
Well, I don't just want to copy what you just said about walking, but for me, walking is also like definitely meditation for me, especially if it be somewhere in nature, by the beach or by a nice park or whatever. That's really important. In terms of like self-care as well, I'd really like to improve my diet, and I think it's preparation time really to cook nutritious meals where I've just let that slide because it's not a priority because I've had so much other things going on. And again, in terms of like feeling better for me, I would really like to up the amount of plants that I think so many people feel that way. They really want to eat healthier. They really want to plan their meals more, but it is that effort and the upfront preparation that kind of gets us down sometimes. So sometimes having that as your goal, maybe, and breaking it down to maybe I don't have to do it every day. Again, that's where we get into rigid mindset with our goals. Sometimes even with our self-care goals, I find people tend to beat themselves up a lot, right? So they'll be
like, oh, well, I only ate a salad one day this week, or I only made my meals twice. Well, that's okay. Let's just aim for that. Let's aim for like one time a week or two times a week instead of thinking, oh, I need to do this every day and plan it and make it a routine. Because what happens then is it becomes too strict and our brain starts to resist it, right? We just don't want to do the same thing every day sometimes.
I think as well, for me, living on my own, sometimes I can find excuses not to do it, you know?
Yeah.
And I've realized this recently because I'm dating a single dad, and he makes everything from scratch, and he works full time and he's got 2 kids, but he's like, nutrition is very important to him. And I think if he can make time to do it and feed his tribe, then I can prepare, like you said, if it's not every day, I can at least increase the amount that I'm taking care of myself with food.
Well, just to normalize that, I have heard from people, it's way harder when it's just yourself. I think we are kind of socially motivated. And even if you're feeding your kids or somebody else, it's like that's built into, well, now I have to do it. Now it's non-negotiable because I have to feed a bunch of people. But when it's just ourselves, it really is easy to kind of put it off and think, it's too much work, or I'll get bored of eating that thing 2 days in a row. That kind of thing. So anyway, so we map out our goals under self-care, and then the other 2 columns are entirely up to the person doing them. So a lot of times people will pick work and creative, or household and relationships. You could pick a variety of things. It just depends on what you want to focus on this month to make it more important in your schedule. So it's about making things that are important to you important in your schedule too. And I think it's that mindset shift of, what really does make me feel a sense of well-being? What really does make me feel calm and happy? And how do I treat that as important in my time as work? Because we all treat work as like hyper important. It's slotted in and we show up at the same time and it's consistent. But then all the other stuff is sort of like we're winging it, and it's loosey-goosey sometimes, and it's all over the place. And as a result, we kind of cheat ourselves of doing the things that actually make us feel well and make us feel happy and make us feel that sense of like fulfillment that we may not be getting from our day jobs, sometimes.
Yeah. And it just seems to get pushed further to the back of the list, doesn't it? Like, It's like, do we deserve to sit and read a nice book, when there's all this that needs to be done?
Yeah. So when you wrote it out on paper, what did it do for you? What did you notice?
Well, it was really nice to like see it, but it was actually what I found really helpful is then when you broke it down further. So it was like, okay, well, here's the goal map. I think I did 3 months or 6 months, but then it was like, well, how do we make that achievable by breaking it down into bite-sized tasks? Mm-hmm. And even seeing the examples in the book really helped because it kind of illustrated the point that like, it doesn't have to be these huge things that you're kind of setting yourself up to really struggle to maintain alongside the busyness of life.
Yeah.
It's kind of, doing things that you are setting you up for success, I suppose. Right.
By making our expectations more realistic based on what we're feeling right now, like how much we have on our plates, we actually set ourselves up in a better way to accomplish them. And sometimes people even do more when they make the step that they have to do that month super easy. What I find is they go way beyond that usually, as opposed to the other way, when you make the step too hard to do, you don't do it because it sounds too scary. And then you just spend all month beating yourself up. So then we're in a loop of just feeling worse and worse and procrastinating that goal more and more, which we've kind of done to ourselves by making it too unrealistic and too harsh at the get-go.
Yeah, definitely. I really liked as well another tool that you had. I guess we could segue on from that, and that's the calm zone.
Yeah.
Again, like carving out the time, just kind of seeing where you're at, I suppose.
I guess what I was trying to do with that is illustrate that most of us have a great capacity to feel stressed out. Like I want people out there listening right now to think, how much of the day are you feeling some kind of level of stress? Most of us are going through the day and we're feeling that all day long to the point where I think people have forgotten what a lack of stress feels like sometimes. Like, actually imagine in your head space where there's no stress at all. Like, you're not thinking about the state of the world or the state of your house or your to-do list or anything. And there's just actual space that you're sitting in without any worries or stress or whatever. That can be hard for people to do. A lot of times when I work with people, they'll say, I don't really remember a time where there wasn't that. What is that like? And then learning to stretch your capacity to feel calm, almost like a muscle, just practice that space a little bit. I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to think about things right now. What would it feel like if that space were a little bit longer than 10 seconds or a minute? Most of us can only hold on to it for a blip of time.
So in the calm zone, is it about just doing nothing?
Maybe it's about doing things that are not activating your stress. So like you said, you could go for a walk. You could even be washing the dishes, but can we bring the stress down? Can we go into the moment more? And then, so I ask people to draw a square and think of it as their calm zone, right? And then think of the things outside of the square, like you write on the sides of it. What are things that tend to take away your calm? So maybe multitasking too much or being on your phone too much, looking at the news or, other things that we tend to do a lot of with our time, but they're not really helping us stay in our calm zone, right? So they're kind of removing us from that square. And then how do we protect that calm zone a little more? So kind of visualize it as a space. And how would you protect it more? Well, maybe, at 8:00, I stop looking at my phone so much. Or maybe when my stress is running high at 4:00, I go for a walk every day or something like that. We start to think more strategically about protecting our calm from the things that tend to take it away.
Yeah. Should I share another one that I liked? The task intensity meter.
Yeah. So the task intensity meter is where I ask people to rate tasks as low, middle, high intensity. So what's an example of something that's like a low intensity for you?
Low intensity task. Probably doing the dishes.
Really? Because some people would say that's high.
Yes, I don't cook.
Well, that helps, right?
What else would be low intensity? Going for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about mid intensity? What's like kind of in the middle? It's a little stressful, but not too bad.
I would say editing.
Mm-hmm.
Editing for the podcast. I know it like the back of my hand, but I still have to go through everything with a fine tooth comb.
Right.
Yourself.
Yeah. And some days it's harder than others, I find. It just depends on where I am mentally and like how busy I am.
Yeah.
So with the intensity meter, it's not like you rate it and then it's that way forever. It's like we need to do this on a regular basis, look at the tasks ahead of us, and then rate them based on our general energy and focus levels. Some days are just going to be harder generally because our brains are wired to our bodies. So if our bodies are struggling, we have the flu or we're tired, everything's going to feel higher intensity. And then other days things feel low intensity that, that we struggled with weeks before. So what would you rate as high intensity? What's the kind of task that tends to spike your stress?
It's that moment before you start writing.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like, oh God, how am I going to start this?
And you need to find the motivation to even put your idea down.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's true for all writers. I don't know any writer who thinks that's easy.
Like, that's when I think procrastination is just so hard to not play with.
Yeah.
I'd rather literally do anything other than what I need to do because I start to feel like overwhelmed with it and the pressure of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, because once I get into it, I tend to really enjoy it, but it's just getting over that threshold,
It's just starting it. Writing is one of the hardest things. I think it's true of other artists too. Like I've heard when I have clients who are painters and things like this, they often avoid just putting the first stroke on the painting, because I think it's the same thing. It's so intimidating. You don't know really what you're doing yet. It's like a lump of clay and you have to turn it into a shape. And like, we haven't seen what shape it's going to become yet.
Yeah. Working with your many clients and you yourself, have you got any tips?
Well, I really ease people into it. So if you're feeling a really high level of resistance, there are certain creative projects where it's higher, right? The resistance is higher for whatever reason. For some people, it's because they're getting paid or there's a lot of pressure or a deadline. For other people, it's the nature of the project. Like they just don't have a clear idea yet of what they're going to do. So I'd say make the first step so easy that it almost tricks your brain into doing it. So an example would be like, all you had to do one day was just open up the document, type a title, and then close it. Like get out before your brain starts freaking out about it, you know? And then the next day you think, okay, well, I'll just do one more sentence. And then for a lot of my clients, timers work. So one of my clients calls it block 30s, where we just say, you just have to do it for 30 minutes. Whatever happens is okay. Even if all you do is type your name and you just sit there for 30 minutes, that's all you have to do. And for some reason, I think, especially artists, creative people tend to work well in bursts like that when there's some kind of limitation and you just make it sound like no pressure at all. They can do it. They can say like, okay, well, all week long, I can probably find a half hour to just sit there and do a little bit, right? And then slowly those block 30s, you do a couple a day or a couple every other day, and it starts adding up. At a certain point, you don't need to use the time sprint anymore because the momentum and motivation kicks in. I think what's hard for a lot of people is they're waiting for the motivation, but the motivation won't find you until you actually move forward a little bit. And the clarity often doesn't find you until you've put a few things down on the page or whatever the project is you're working on, right? So it's like you have to shape that lump of clay a little bit, and then the ideas start popping in your head. And then that creative part of your brain turns on and starts giving you all that stuff to move forward. But until we get to that point, it's like tricking your brain into, okay, we're just going to sit here, stare at this for a half hour, and then I'm done, you know?
Yeah. Well, how is it that for me, I seem to work better on a deadline, even though, and I'll leave it to the last minute usually. And I've always been the same since I was at school.
Yeah.
I think that's when the adrenaline kicks in, and then maybe a little bit of stress can be helpful, can help get us going. But when it is more like a long-term project, like writing a book, say, I'm just curious with you, Risa, because you've written a book a year for is it the past 5 years?
Yeah.
So I don't know in terms of deadlines. I would assume that
most of the time I'm on my own, and then I sell it, and then there's a deadline. You know, I've had to write about half of it till I get to that point, you know, just to be able to sell it. Yeah.
Right. So how do you get it to that point then when it's like the only person that
it's hard when it's just you, right? Yeah. I think a lot of us can relate to what you're saying. I know I can. I think I trained myself as a kid to cram because I thought having that adrenaline and cortisol probably was what I trained my brain to function the best, you know, under those circumstances. But over the years, I've learned that that has a cost and I often pay for it. So I'll cram and I'll get a huge amount done, but then I'll have like almost like a task hangover where like a week after I'm just struggling. I'm like struggling to even do laundry or basic things because I kind of burned through all my neural energy doing this really difficult thing. So I've kind of learned a steadier approach is that I need some kind of accountability. I don't do very well just in my own bubble, lost in my own head, you know, saying, oh, I'll just get around to it when I have time. Because my sense of time, it can be really wonky. You know, I could say that to you for years. And in my head, I think I'm moving forward, but I'm not. So I need to tell somebody. So I have different writing friends that I ask when I start a project, hey, can I just text you every Friday and tell you how many pages I've done? Or can I just tell you, and you don't have to give me feedback and I won't force you to read the pages. I just need to tell somebody. And if you want to tell me that you're working on something, we can go back and forth. So I have that built in to kind of get me over the hurdle of starting. I don't use it the whole way. Usually I just need it in the beginning to get myself past that first bump. And then I have rituals that I do where, you know, I call it like writing Fridays. I just name a day and I tell my brain, no matter what happens, I have to write on Friday. In my case, Fridays work because all my other jobs are slower then. So I'll say on writing Friday, I'm going to do a little bit. I'll do 10 minutes. I'll do 20 minutes. And then I kind of commit to the same time each week. And I put it as a chunk on my calendar and I make it sort of like it's a job in my head rather than this thing I'm playing around with that I'll do someday. I get really honest about I need actual time to do this thing.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a little bit like what you were saying about the it wasn't a tool, but it was the hats.
Yeah, the hats method. Yeah. So what I do is I name the day. I say like Fridays I'm going to write. And then when I sit down to write, I imagine putting the writer hat on, right? So I get everything I need together in my little space so I won't get up 100 times. Like I have my coffee, I have like a pen and paper. I make sure it's all there. I call it like we're kind of like nesting around the computer, you know? This is a term I heard somewhere and I like it. Like you just dig in and you're like, okay, for an hour, I'm just going to be here. And I'm going to do this and I'm going to shift into that gear, which means I can't be wearing 3 other hats. Like I can't be sending my kid's teacher an email or, replying to my own students for my class or trying to edit some other piece I'm working on. I have to just focus on what's ahead of me and what the project is. And that's why there has to be a time limit. So you can't say, I'm going to do this all day Friday. You could say something like, I'm going to do this until lunch. And then I'll see where the day goes. Usually I don't last very long when I sit down in writer mode. It's maybe an hour or 2 maximum that my brain can focus. And I kind of accept that about myself. I don't expect myself to do some amazing cram session that's 10 hours long and I finish the whole book. That's not possible for me these days to do. How about you? How do you get in the mood to write when it's time to write?
Usually because of a deadline. But the thing is, for like 20 years, I've been sat on a fiction book. Mm-hmm. I've written like 10 chapters, but it would be probably 30. And I've got this fear of going back to it. And that I started, about half a year ago, I looked back and I thought, oh, is it as bad as you start thinking it's going to be terrible, don't you? And then I went back and I was like, actually, no, I'm quite enjoying this. Like, it needs some tweaking. But for me, it's just, I guess, because I only have myself accountable, and it's the fear of rejection on it as well, as because it's like branching out into a different part of writing than what I do usually, which is like, mainly script or like journalism. So
yeah, I call that one the halfway drift. And I think so many writers get that one. It's in my procrastination book. I know that hits me pretty much every project I've ever taken on. About halfway through, my confidence dips, sometimes for no reason whatsoever. Like I just get lost in my own head. And I really do think it is a confidence thing. I think we're charging along and the momentum is carrying us. And then maybe we hit a hard part that we don't know how to tackle. Or we start getting in our own heads with the inner critic criticizing us. And we shut down halfway through. And I see so many people doing this with projects where they're like, I'm just going to take a break. And that's good. I mean, usually taking a break is healthy to do. But somewhere in there, there's so much resistance that they just never go back to it. And that almost becomes paralyzing in a way because you've done this huge chunks and then you start feeling guilty and a sense of shame, like, oh my God, I was on such a roll. What happened? Why can't I get back on the roll? And so what I've learned is to go really gentle and talk to myself in a really nice way. Like I'm a kid who doesn't want to finish their homework and just say, all we have to do is look at it today. We'll just do a little bit more. And you basically have to start where you were at the beginning again, which is like ramp up very slowly and gently, until your brain just gets a whiff of a new idea. And then that momentum kicks in again. But I think that's quite common, that halfway drift or that halfway stuck point.
Oh, thank you. That makes me feel a bit better about it. I've enrolled in a short story writing course just to get me back in the habit of, again, writing for like fun or just, creatively and just to hopefully like get the juices flowing again.
Yeah, because it is kind of like a muscle, right? So that's another thing we can think about. even in terms of self-care, is that sometimes when we're avoiding like going to the gym or going back and looking at our novel or something like this, we can go a little gentler at it and just get our brain in the mood to do it somehow. So an example would be a client I have who's been avoiding going to the gym, who's paying for this gym membership and feels so guilty. I think this is the common problem, right? A lot of gyms will say they make money off people who never even go, for like a year or two. So I think what I'd start with is not going to the gym. I'd start with just go for a walk around the block and get back in the mood of moving again, whatever that is, even if it's doing a little stretch or just gently ease into it without beating yourself up. Because every time we're beating ourselves up, we're shutting ourselves down again, and when we start to talk to ourselves gently, our brain perks up and we want to move forward again. So the quickest way to get yourself stuck when you're already kind of feeling that is to beat yourself up, is to yell at yourself, is to try to use tough love to get yourself to do it, because your brain already doesn't want to do it. And now we're going double down on the not wanting to do it. Our brain is just going to resist.
I liked as well when you were talking, going back to the task intensity meter, and this is only, I suppose, applicable for people that maybe work for themselves or do have some flexibility with their work schedule, I suppose, but like carving out your tasks based on your energy levels. And I thought, that's a good idea, because like, to be honest, I'm not a morning person. I've tried everything under the sun to be better when I wake up, but I am like the walk. So that would be
I can relate. Yeah.
That would be time for me to write, because, it would just be gobbledygook.
Well, and it's so funny. People always hear what I say, like match the high intensity task with the high level of energy time of day. People are like, that makes so much sense. But I'm like, yeah, but none of us do that really. We kind of go the opposite way. We're always like, I'm exhausted. My brain is foggy. Let's tackle the super hard task right now. And that's not going to work very well. It's going to take you way longer. You're going to have all this ramping up time where you burn through all your energy just trying to sit there in the morning. Whereas maybe you need to start with low intensity tasks. And then maybe you're a nighttime person where it kicks in at night, or it kicks in the midday after lunch or something. We're all different. It's not a one size fits all. We just have to learn to read our own brains and bodies in a more nuanced way each day and kind of reset every single day, depending on what we're feeling.
Yeah. And I think, like you illustrate in the book as well, even if you are working for an employer, it's like, if I have some flexibility with the tasks of the day, base that on my energy levels. So like, on to the more mundane emails when I've got low energy. And then if I have to put my presentation together, I'll do that in the higher energy bits, or, periods. Yeah. That was really helpful. Totally makes sense. But yet not many of us, I think, do that.
Yeah. Well, we kind of just throw ourselves into the day. I mean, I guess it's this idea of winging it with time. I like the idea of winging it with time when it's our vacation, when it's time where we're just doing nothing. You really shouldn't have a schedule then. It's more fun sometimes to just experience it. But day-to-day life, we can't always have that approach and get the things we need to do done in a not stressful way. Like, it does take some planning. And I think that's the part I struggle to convince people to do. It will only take you a couple seconds to jot all this stuff down on paper, and it saves you so much time later. And a lot of us, we don't want to take the couple minutes of time in the morning to just sit there and sort of look at things strategically and think, when would be the best time to do this? We just want to rush in. And sometimes we're rushing into it, trying to wing it from a very stressed out place. And as I write about in my books, when we're that stressed out, our executive functioning doesn't always turn on. So our organization ability doesn't turn on very well. Our task prioritization of like, when do I do this? We're not always making the best judgment calls from that stressed out place. So even when we're talking about stress, just starting your day off with some kind of ritual where you write stuff down on paper, where you try to gauge when the best time to do a certain task is, or even break things down into tinier steps is going to save you time later in the day. And maybe make it so you're not feeling as stressed out and grumpy by the end of the day too. Can it have a big effect on our moods as well?
Yeah. And if you don't mind me just kind of bringing it back to the International Stress Awareness Month.
Yeah.
The theme this year is lead with love. Well, hashtag lead with love. And I had a couple of questions for you about this. How has writing this book changed the way you get stuff done? And how do you personally lead with love through your own work?
Okay. The way I lead with love is that I believe in self-kindness and talking to ourselves in a loving manner, because when we talk to ourselves in a loving manner, we can convince ourselves to do the things we need to do. And when we talk to ourselves in a gentler way about things we need to do, our brain can find the fun or the excitement in doing it again. So I really think the words you say to yourself matter. I think it matters in terms of how stressed out we feel, but I also think it matters in terms of why we want to do the thing in front of us too. So we need to be really clear with ourselves why we're doing the thing. How are we helping ourselves by doing the thing? How are we helping other people by doing the thing in front of us? And how can we be kinder to ourselves while we're doing it? So it's the idea of adopting a self-kindness mindset to your goals and your time and just to your daily life. How can you be kinder to yourself today in the things that you're doing? Like, how can you set things up so you're on your own side, you're on your own team, you're not making things harder for yourself? And a lot of times that is evaluating, do I need to do this thing? Is it aligned with something I actually want to do? Can I say no to this? Or can I prioritize something that makes me feel happier and a sense of well-being so that I can tackle the stuff I need to do that I'm, just trying to get through right now. So it's making our own well-being important. It's making our own body and brain important, and kind of seeing it like you got to be on your own side with things you're doing instead of beating yourself up.
Yeah. We talked about last time the toxic productivity mindset.
Yeah.
Switch into this self-kindness mindset instead. We can still be productive, but what would you say to somebody who is a highly productive person, but they still feel emotionally drained or unfulfilled? Because I think it's particularly women, I think.
Yeah. We're susceptible to it.
Yeah. Not eliminating men by, any stretch, but I know a lot of women that struggle with this.
Yeah, a lot of women have trouble appreciating things they've done for themselves. You know, and part of it is society, because we honestly probably don't get as much praise sometimes as men do, not to make a generalization, but there is something in there where girls growing up probably hear a lot of criticism, or expected to do a lot of things over many different areas and all perfectly well, right? So we do have unrealistic expectations for ourselves a lot of the time to be perfect at everything and go, go, go. And I think what I see a lot of in high achieving people is that they don't take a lot of time throughout their day to acknowledge things they just did. It's like they're in a race and they're just racing to get to the next thing. And as soon as they do it, they put another carrot in front of them and they're trying to get to that carrot and that carrot. And they have this idea in their head, like, at some point I'll get so many carrots, I'll just be so happy. But that's not how our brains work, because we haven't trained ourselves to feel the happy feelings. We're just sort of on this treadmill of getting things, but we're not practicing the feelings. So we need to practice the feelings we want to feel. And we can do that in tiny doses. So, as you go throughout your day, when you complete even a little task, like you sent an email you've been avoiding, or you finish the chores for the day, or you sweep the floor, anything, we need to take a second and think, I did that. That's done. I'm done with that now. And that's kind of a neutral thought. You're not even saying I'm a great person because I did this. You can do that if you like, but just a neutral thought of acknowledging it. I finished that. It's done. Good job. Moving on to the next thing. For a second, it's like a tiny pause that starts training that muscle so that when you do a big thing later on, like a really amazing thing you've been working so hard at, like let's say you finish the novel you've been working on for years and years, then we can celebrate more. Then we can actually feel it emotionally more because we've been practicing the whole way. We've been building that muscle. What I see is the opposite, is like people don't practice feeling good about any of the steps. Then the big thing happens and they almost feel depressed and deflated because they're like, why don't I feel happy? Why am I not jumping up and down celebrating? Well, we needed to practice that the whole way through, so that you get that big rush at the end of like, wow, this took me so long to do it and I did it.
Yeah. I always get so much out of our chats, Risa.
Well, I love talking to you as well. I feel like we're so aligned and, I can always relate to other writers because it's such a struggle. It really is. I mean, I think whenever I meet another writer, we're always saying the same thing. Like, I can't get started. I want to give up halfway through. And at the end, you're like, I love doing this. Why don't I do it more?
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your experiences with the book. Where can people find you and your podcast?
Yeah, the podcast is available in all the usual podcast places. That's the Happier Life Project. Also available on the My Possible Self app, which is a free mental health and wellness app that it's based out of the UK, but it's available globally. And you can reach us on Instagram at My Possible Self as well.
And for me, you can find me at risawilliams.com. And the podcast is the Motivation Mindset Podcast. And I'm also on Instagram all the time at Risa Williams Therapy, giving books away. So follow me there and you'll probably at some point get a free book.
Nice. How's it all been going with the book stuff?
It's going pretty well. It's nice to have a few books out because people will check out one and then they want to check out the other. So I'm enjoying that. And I have a kids book coming out that's all about mindfulness tools for kids. It's called the Calm Kids Collection. I'm co-writing it with another therapist who's an art therapist who does the illustrations. So for the parents out there, check that out soon. It'll be coming out in the next month. Thanks so much, Gabby. Have a good rest of your week.
Take care.
Bye.
It's Gabby back with you. Thank you again, Risa. Always a pleasure. Get stuff done without the stress. 5 secrets for making the best use of your time and achieving your goals for greater happiness is available to buy now, and I highly recommend you picking up a copy. And thank you to you, my friend, for listening to this crossover episode of the Happier Life Project podcast with the Motivation Mindset Podcast. Just one more minute of your time while I run through the important housekeeping, and then I'll say farewell. If you are suffering with your mental health, there is a crisis button on the My Possible Self app, which will signpost you to the correct information for immediate expert advice. Those of you who are listening on one of the podcast platforms, the My Possible Self app is completely free to download, so you don't need to worry about it costing you anything. If you are in crisis or you think you may have an emergency, please do call your doctor or the emergency services immediately. The views expressed in this podcast are solely those of the interviewer, which is me, and the interviewees. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered as a substitute for professional or medical advice. Our partners at the Priory Healthcare are not involved in the production or content of this podcast. If you found this episode helpful and you are listening on one of the podcast platforms, please do subscribe not just to the Happier Life Project, but to the Motivation Mindset Podcast as well. And to find and follow us on social media, if you're not already there, we are at My Possible Self, and I've been at Radio Gabby. Until the next one, do take care. Bye for now.